Imagine a world where the human mind is not just studied but shattered, where scientists, in the name of progress, crossed lines no one should ever approach. These weren't scenes from a nightmare, they were real, and they happened in our lifetime. If you're drawn to the shadows of history's darkest secrets, hit that subscribe button now and drop a comment below. Which experiment chills you the most? Let's uncover the truth together. In the mid-20th century, as the world emerged from the ashes of war, a new frontier beckoned. Psychology, once a gentle exploration of the soul, became a battleground for understanding obedience, fear, and control. Laboratories across America and Europe transformed into hidden arenas where ordinary people volunteered for what they believed were harmless studies. But beneath the sterile lights and clipboards lay ambitions that twisted curiosity into cruelty. The stage was set in the 1950s and 60s, a time when Cold War paranoia fueled unchecked experiments. Governments poured millions into probing the depths of the human psyche, whispering promises of breakthroughs while ignoring the screams echoing in the corridors. We begin in the quiet halls of Yale University, 1961. A mild-mannered psychologist named Stanley Milgram sought to unravel a simple question. How far would people go to obey authority? Volunteers arrived unsuspecting, for what they were told was a memory test. They drew slips assigning them the role of teacher. Across the room, strapped to an electric chair, sat a learner, an actor, though the teachers didn't know it. As the test progressed, the learner answered questions wrong, and with each error, the teacher was instructed to administer a shock, starting at 15 volts. Harmless at first, the dial climbed. 75 volts, 150. The learner's protests grew louder, pounding on the wall in agony. At 300 volts, screams pierced the air. Yet the experimenter in a white lab coat urged them on with calm insistence. The experiment requires that you continue. Most teachers hesitated, sweat beading on their foreheads, hands trembling over the switch. But they pressed it. Up to 450 volts, labeled XXX for danger. 2/3 of them did it, not because they were monsters, but because authority wore a convincing mask. What drove them? Fear of disappointing the expert? The diffusion of responsibility in that sealed room? Milgram's findings rippled outward, explaining atrocities from Nuremberg to everyday compliance. But at what cost to those who pulled the levers, haunted by the phantom screams? As the decade unfolded, the shadows lengthened. Across the Atlantic, in the dim wards of British asylums, another experiment unfolded, one that preyed on vulnerability. In 1962, David Rosenhan, a Stanford researcher, devised a test to expose the flaws in psychiatric diagnosis. 8 sane individuals, professors, housewives, artists, approached hospitals claiming they heard a single harmless voice. Empty, hollow, thud, nothing more. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, they were admitted. Then the real horror began. They dropped the pretense, behaving normally. Yet the staff saw madness everywhere. A patient pacing, delusional agitation, writing notes, evidence of paranoia. They were trapped, medicated against their will, stripped of dignity. One spent weeks in seclusion, another months. Released only when they admitted to being sick. A lie to escape. This wasn't isolated, it revealed a system blind to sanity where labels became cages. Rosenhan's subjects emerged changed, their trust in medicine fractured. But the questions lingered. If the sane could be imprisoned so easily, what of the truly vulnerable? The experiment exposed psychiatry's underbelly, yet it also sowed doubt. Were there darker forces at play manipulating diagnoses for control? As the 1960s bled into the 70s, America's own institutions grew bolder, hungrier for secrets. Enter the basement of Stanford University, summer of 1971. Philip Zimbardo, a charismatic professor, transformed the psychology department into a mock prison. He placed an ad. College students wanted for a 2-week study on the psychology of imprisonment. 24 young men screened for stability arrived. Half became guards, half prisoners. No scripts, just roles. The simulation started innocently enough. Arrests at home, blindfolds, the clang of cell doors. But within hours, the air thickened with power. Guards, ordinary guys in mirrored sunglasses, devised rules. Push-ups as punishment, meals withheld. The prisoners rebelled on day 2, barricading their cells. The response was swift, brutal. Guards stripped them naked, sprayed them with fire extinguishers, forced them into solitary. A closet dubbed the Hole. One prisoner, number 8612, broke down after 36 hours, screaming, weeping, begging release. He was deemed hysterical, unfit. Others adapted in horrifying ways. Number 819 submitted, cleaning toilets with his bare hands, his spirit crumbling. Zimbardo watched, filming as the line between simulation and reality blurred. Guards grew sadistic, prisoners passive. It ended after 6 days, not by design but by intervention. A colleague, horrified, stormed, "What the hell is going on here?" The Stanford Prison Experiment became legend, a mirror to Abu Ghraib's future shadows. But Zimbardo later reflected, had he, as superintendent, fueled the fire? The participants carried scars, nightmares, therapy sessions, a lifetime questioning human nature's fragility. Yet it raised a chilling query. In any of us lies the capacity for cruelty awakened by circumstance. What if such experiments weren't stopped, but escalated in secret? Transitioning from academia's spotlights to the veiled corridors of government, we arrive at the heart of true dread. Project MKUltra. Launched in 1953 by the CIA under the banner of national security, this wasn't a university study. It was a clandestine war on the mind. Director Alan Dulles, amid fears of Soviet brainwashing, greenlit a program to shatter and rebuild human consciousness. LSD, hypnosis, electroshock, tools once confined to labs now roamed free agents. Scientists, contractors, unwitting citizens. The goal? A truth serum for interrogations, a weapon to reprogram enemies. But the boundaries dissolved. In the back alleys of San Francisco, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb oversaw safe houses disguised as flop houses. Prostitutes lured men inside, dosing their drinks with acid. Hidden cameras rolled as realities fractured. Conversations with walls, terror in the mundane. One subject, a federal worker, leaped from a window convinced he could fly. Death ruled as suicide. Across the country in New Orleans, Dr. Robert Heath at Tulane University injected terminally ill patients with LSD, observing their descent into hallucinatory hells. A woman already fragile clawed at invisible demons for hours. No consent, no escape. Even prisoners in Kentucky's penitentiary became test subjects, strapped to chairs as electrodes buzzed through their skulls, memories erased in bursts of voltage. The program sprawled, touching universities, hospitals, even Canadian asylums. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Dr. Ewen Cameron pioneered psychic driving. Patients, often mothers seeking help for depression, underwent depatterning. Heavy sedation, paralysis drugs, repeated audio loops blasting their faults. You are a bad mother, a failure. Then rebuilding like clay. One woman, Velma Orlikow, emerged unable to recognize her children, her personality a void. The CIA funneled millions, destroying records in 1973 when scandals loomed. But fragments survived, testimonies of lives unraveled. What bound these experiments? A hubris that the mind could be conquered. Milgram showed obedience's edge, Rosenhan diagnosis's trap, Zimbardo rolls poison, MKUltra controls abyss, each built on the last, a crescendo of ethical erosion. Witnesses emerged later, declassified files, survivor accounts, painting a tapestry of horror. A CIA memo from 1952 chillingly noted, "We must explore every avenue no matter how distasteful." But as details surfaced in the 1970s church committee hearings, the nation recoiled. Senators pored over shredded documents, hearing tales of a jazz musician dosed at a party driving off a bridge, a soldier mind-frayed, institutionalized for life. Yet the revelations deepened the mystery. Files vanished, scientists silenced by national security. Was MKUltra truly ended or merely rebranded? Rumors persisted of black sites where echoes of those experiments lingered into the 80s and beyond. Consider the case of Frank Olson, a biochemist privy to MKUltra's secrets. In 1953, after a CIA retreat where LSD was slipped into his drink, he plummeted from a 10th floor window. Suicide, officials said. But his family unearthed doubts, bruises suggesting struggle, a suppressed autopsy. In 1975, President Ford issued an apology. Compensation followed. Still, Olson's son pursued truth, exhuming the body in 1994, evidence of a blow to the head before the fall. Murder? To silence a man who knew too much. These threads wove tighter. In the 1940s preceding MKUltra, the Tuskegee syphilis study, though medical, not purely psychological, mirrored the disregard. Black sharecroppers in Alabama, infected and untreated for decades, watched as researchers noted their suffering, denying penicillin even after its discovery. Deception as therapy, bodies as data. It ended in 1972 amid outrage, but the psychological toll, betrayal, generations scarred, endured. Similarly, in the 1950s, the CIA's Artichoke program tested hypnosis on assassins, implanting commands to kill. A memo described a subject post-session, walking into traffic, obeying a planted urge. Fact or fabrication? The line blurred. Delving deeper, we encounter the Little Albert experiment of 1920, an early harbinger. At Johns Hopkins, psychologist John Watson conditioned a 9-month-old infant to fear a white rat. First playtime, then a loud clang behind the baby's delight. Terror followed, sobbing, crawling away. Watson extended it, fear of rabbits, dogs, even Santa masks. Little Albert, Douglas Merritt, vanished from records, his phobia untreated. He died young, likely of hydrocephalus, but the experiment's shadow loomed. Watson boasted, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, and I'll guarantee to take anyone at random and train him to become any type of specialist." A blueprint for manipulation. These weren't anomalies, they formed a pattern. Post-World War II, Nazi doctors' trials at Nuremberg birthed the ethical code. Consent, no harm. Yet America imported scientists via Operation Paperclip, their knowledge seeding programs like MKUltra. Gehlen Organization ex-Nazis advised the CIA on mind control, blending wartime horrors with new ambitions. A 1951 memo. Interrogation techniques must induce regression. Sensory deprivation tanks followed. Subjects floated in darkness for weeks, emerging dissociated, pliable. One Navy volunteer hallucinated sea monsters devouring his family. Another, a CIA operative, confessed fabricated spies to end the void. As the 1960s waned, the experiments fractured lives on a personal scale. Take the case of Harold Blower, a tennis player dosed with MDA, a hallucinogen precursor, in a New York Army lab, 1953. He spiraled into paranoia, dying days later. His daughter sued, uncovering the web, military-civilian collusion, no warnings, or the terminal experiments on death row inmates where psychologists induced near-death states with drugs, probing the afterlife's edge. Inmates begged for death's mercy over the induced limbo. The buildup was relentless, each revelation peeling back layers of complicity. Universities funded by agencies, professors doubling as operatives. A 1963 MKUltra sub-project at Harvard dosed unwitting students during lectures, gauging crowd reactions. Notes described mass hysteria, subjects clawing at doors. Ethical reviews? Non-existent until Watergate's fallout forced change. The 1974 National Research Act birthed IRBS, but damage lingered. Lawsuits, apologies, a public scarred by distrust. Now we reach the precipice. The most harrowing chapter unfolds not in a lab, but in the frozen isolation of a Canadian winter. 1957. At the Allen Memorial, Ewen Cameron's depatterning reached its zenith with patient Mary Morrow. A journalist seeking treatment for anxiety, she entered trusting. What followed was systematic erasure. First, coma induced by barbiturates and curare, paralyzed, fed intravenously for months. Then electroconvulsive therapy, not the mild jolts of today, but 75 times normal voltage, 30 to 40 sessions. Memories vaporized. She forgot her husband, her career. Audio tapes looped 16 hours daily. You are nothing. You will be rebuilt. LSD amplified the assault. Visions of melting walls, pursuers in shadows. Mary awoke a stranger, incontinent, childlike. Released, she wandered Montreal streets, piecing fragments. Her husband divorced. She rebuilt through sheer will. But the voids remained. Phobias of tape recorders, distrust of doctors. Cameron, knighted by Queen Elizabeth, defended it. Intensive treatment for severe cases. But survivors like her and Velma Orlikow, wife of a parliamentarian, sued in the 1980s. The CIA settled for $750,000, admitting no liability. Files revealed 127 victims, many Canadian housewives, their psyches collateral in the Cold War. This was the revelation. MKUltra wasn't rogue science, it was policy. Declassified in 1977, over 20,000 documents detailed 149 sub-projects spanning 80 institutions. LSD procured by the ton from Sandow's labs. Hypnosis sessions where subjects were commanded to forget or worse, act against their will. A 1954 manual instructed, create demoralization through prolonged uncertainty. The twist? Many targets were Americans, dosed in public, subways, bars to test operational use. One file described a French diplomat after a spiked drink, revealing NATO secrets in delirium. The climax peaked in 1977 Senate hearings. Admiral Stansfield Turner testified, "The full scope may never be known." Senators gasped at exhibits. Photos of shaved heads, strapped limbs, transcripts of screams. Richard Helms had ordered destruction, but backup surfaced. Victims testified a Kentucky woman sterilized post-experiment to prevent tainted offspring. A San Francisco man blinded temporarily by overdose. The horror wasn't just the acts, but the banality. The memos typed in triplicate, budgets approved in Washington. It echoed Milgram, ordinary people enabling evil under orders. Cameron died in 1967, unrepentant. Zimbardo apologized in 2011, his experiment a noble failure. Milgram wrestled guilt till his end, but the revelations forced reckoning. The 1975 Rockefeller Commission exposed it all, leading to bans on non-consensual research. Yet whispers endured. Did echoes persist in Guantanamo's enhanced interrogations? Sleep deprivation mirroring depatterning? As the echoes fade, we reflect on a century's toll. These experiments, born of curiosity and fear, stripped humanity's veneer. They showed not monsters, but mirrors, how authority bends wills, roles corrupt souls, secrets devour lives. Thousands affected, prisoners radicalized in Zimbardo's cells, families shattered by MKUltra's ghosts, the sane labeled mad in Rosenhan's trap. Society evolved, ethics codes, oversight, but scars remain. Distrust in science, paranoia in shadows. Were they necessary? Progress demands sacrifice, some argue. Yet at what price the soul? In the quiet aftermath, one ponders. If history repeated, would we recognize the descent? Or are we even now participants in unseen trials? The veil of the unknown lifts, but mysteries endure. Join us next time as we delve deeper into the enigmas that shape our world. Until then, question everything.